Thank you, Daniel. And, obviously I've been joined today by my co-panelists who are going to be focusing a lot on the practical aspects of developing internal IP strategies and the challenges that may exist in India with respect to their relevant business organizations. I'm actually going backwards a little bit and talking about what you need in terms of the policy and how the policy and legal framework will ultimately impact how IP strategies are effectively developed and implemented by organizations. And this would hold true for organizations based in the US as well as those based in India. Now, over the course of our two-day conference here, we're really going to be talking about the possibilities in India surrounding IP creation, innovation, and protection. And we want to be talking about IP in a very positive way. And I think as we sit here today, India is uniquely situated to benefit from the IP potential in this country. But we don't see the outcomes in terms of innovation pipelines in India that one would expect, despite the prodigious amount of talent and resources that are currently available. And so the fundamental question is, why is that happening? And this background, all governments, the US government, governments from the UK or Japan, we all have common goals where we're trying to develop policies that will drive economic development. In the US, IP is a critical tool. It's a fundamental tool, and it cuts across patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and other forms of intellectual property. We're constantly striving to optimize our innovation systems to support our continued growth and prosperity. Now, one of the key areas of focus for the US, and this was developed through a system of trial and error, was how we capitalize on the activities at our centers of learning and research organizations. And over the course of the last 25 to 30 years, what we've learned is leveraging IP, particularly patents, has resulted in transformational products and market opportunities. And it's these transformational innovations and ideas and the development of both domestic and foreign markets which feed or create the loop of innovation, competitiveness, and economic growth. Now, we've been able to develop a number of studies in the US which have been released by the US government and other private entities which validate the proposition that IP is a significant driver of economic growth. And you can look at certain statistics such as patent filings, commercialization percentages, the type of filers, whether they be domestic filers or foreign filers. We found that the US systems are fairly inclusive and they are heavily utilized, and that is basically because the systems have matured and they're effective systems for both the protection of intellectual property as well as the enforcement of intellectual property. I could rattle off a number of statistics about the contribution of IP-intensive industries to the US gross domestic product. It's significant. 27% of the US GDP is linked to IP-intensive industries. IP-intensive industries support 60% of US exports, and they directly or indirectly support 40 million jobs in the US. A big player in this whole ecosystem is US universities and how they serve as a cradle for not only basic research but applied research through their collaborations with federal governmental organizations as well as private sector parties. We can look at one seminal event in policy and legal development in the US, and that would be the passage of the Bayh-Dole Act in 1990. And if you look at the statistics of before and after, it's like night and day. If you look at the number of jobs created, the number of patents filed by universities which are subsequently licensed to third parties and result in the creation of new companies or new products on the market, it tells a very compelling story. And I'll just cite to a couple of statistics. A 2013 autumn study, 5,000 patents were granted to US universities in that year, 5,700 licenses were executed, 750 new companies were formed, and over 700 new products hit the market. This translates into real economic opportunity and growth for U.S. Entities. And it has resulted in the U.S. being a technological leader in many critical industry segments. Now, this experience is not unique to the U.S. You see this dynamic play out in many other developed countries who fall into the category of knowledge-based economies. But you also see emerging economies following the same path as they try to move up the value chain and start making the commitment to be technology leaders rather than followers. We've seen it in the story in Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and now more recently, China. So at the end of the day, there's no secret sauce, there's no secret recipe. Governments have to be very strategic in how they develop their policy frameworks and their legal frameworks to cultivate innovation. Now, India has been debating this, discussing this, proposing policies and laws for many years, and many of you in the room are probably familiar with some of the previous efforts. India declared a decade of innovation in 2010 with the goal of becoming the newest member of the Knowledge Economy Club. But we've seen ad hoc or piecemeal policy development and engagement which have proved to be largely ineffective, and that's validated in all of the statistics and studies that are commonly cited with respect to innovation and competitiveness. India's ranking is going down rather than going up, and this is something that you would not expect given India's huge talent in the area of the STEM fields, as well as the abundant resources that are currently available in the country. So we're looking at India at a crossroads now. What does India have to do to transform its innovation ecosystem, and how are they going to address the underlying legal framework in a meaningful way? And many of us are now waiting for the release of the national IP strategy, which should answer some of those questions. And the goal of the IP strategy, when it was initially launched, was it was going to be designed to establish a comprehensive plan for innovation, which would harness the power of India's academic institutions, create mechanisms for collaborations across sectors, effectively use the IPR system as an incentive for the generation and protection of all types of innovations and ideas, and then finally create efficient enforcement mechanisms so that IP has value, which is quantifiable and which is real, and that is what is going to drive the opportunity for technology transfer, commercialization, and the development of global IP strategies where India becomes a hub of innovation rather than simply being an adopter of technologies. So I think my final takeaway message is India will become a significant innovation hub if the government can knit together the proper policy and legal framework that will invite and attract investment. That is what is going to lead to the climate of innovation in India, where you have built the trust and established the legal certainty that's required for innovation to flourish. And I know, speaking for U.S. industries, that there's a great interest and hope that India will be able to successfully accomplish these policy challenges. Thank you.